somewhere along the way, you buried them, not with ceremony, not with tears, but with silence. The child you once were, wide-eyed, unfiltered, aching for love that didn't come with conditions, was slowly lowered into the grave of your becoming. You didn't mean to kill them. You were just trying to survive. But survival has a cost, and its price is always innocence. You see, no one grows up untouched. You don't age, you harden. You calcify around wounds. You build walls and call them maturity. You trade wonder for strategy, imagination for skepticism, curiosity for caution, because the world doesn't honor the child. It exploits it, mocks it, abandons it. So you learned quickly how to shrink your truth, how to edit your love, how to silence your questions. You learned that being you wasn't safe. And so brick by brick, you constructed a persona strong enough to keep pain out and small enough to fit in. But what you didn't know was that every time you betrayed that child inside you, you didn't just protect yourself. You eroded yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." And so many of us are living out inherited fear. Our parents feared failure, so we overachieve. They feared judgment, so we perform. They feared chaos, so we control everything in sight. We took their ghosts and made them gods. And in doing so, we lost a child who once believed in beauty without proof, in love without earning, in joy without explanation. That child didn't care about status, didn't understand cynicism, didn't measure time in deadlines, or worse, in productivity. They just were, fully, radiantly, unapologetically, and we killed them for the illusion of acceptance, because the world doesn't make space for those who still believe in magic. But now you feel it, that hollow ache when success doesn't satisfy, that quiet rage when people only love the version of you that performs, that numbness that creeps in when you've said, "I'm fine," a few thousand times too many. That's not burnout. That's grief. That's the soul mourning what it abandoned. You didn't just outgrow your childhood. You buried it. And that grave still holds power. Because everything you are now, the anxiety, the control, the perfectionism, is rooted in the moment you told that inner child, "Not now, not here, not like that." So here you are, all grown up and empty. You have the resume, you have the relationship, you have the routine, and yet you can't shake the feeling that something is missing, because it is. The most sacred part of you was never the image you crafted. It was the child you buried, the part of you that believed without evidence, loved without defense, created without fear of failure. And until you go back, until you return to that grave with open hands and trembling voice and whisper, "I'm sorry I left you there," you will never be whole. This is not regression. This is resurrection. To reclaim the child is to reclaim the soul, the authentic, radiant, untamed spark God planted before the world taught you to dim it. Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18:3. This is not metaphor. It is mandate. The kingdom is not for the polished. It is for the pure, and purity is not perfection. It is presence. It is the ability to look life in the eye without flinching, to create without calculating, to cry without shame, to laugh without restraint. The child within you remembers how you just stopped listening. But here's the thing they don't tell you. Reclaiming that child isn't soft work. It's savage. It's violent in the quietest ways, because it requires you to tear down everything you built to keep that child silent, It means revisiting rooms you swore you'd never walk into again. Not physical ones, emotional, spiritual. The rooms where your truth was first rejected, where your first no was punished, where your joy was made too loud, your sensitivity too much, your dreams too impossible. It means looking into the face of the adult you become and realizing how often you've gaslit yourself. How many times you whispered, "I'm over it," when it still controls every decision you make. You tell yourself you're stable. No, you're just numb. You tell yourself you're disciplined. No, you're just scared of failure. You tell yourself you're mature. No, you've just mastered suppression. You learned how to function. But function is not freedom. Function is the addiction of the traumatized. If I can just keep moving, keep performing, keep achieving, maybe the ache will disappear. But it doesn't. It calcifies. And then one day you wake up in a life that looks exactly like success, but feels exactly like captivity, because the child you buried was the only one who knew how to feel, how to trust, how to love without bargaining, and you silenced them to impress people who never had your best interest in mind. So now the work begins, and it is surgical, not the kind that numbs, the kind that cuts you open so you can finally breathe. It starts by looking at the patterns, not judging them, tracking them. Why do you keep choosing emotionally unavailable people? Why do you apologize before you speak? Why do you sabotage every moment of joy with a thought that says, "This won't last"? These aren't habits. They're echoes, ghosts from moments you never grieved. And every echo holds a door. If you're brave enough to knock, like the man who never cried, tough, successful, respected, until the day his daughter said, "Why do you never hug me?" And something broke, because the last person who hugged him was his father, the day before he left and never came back, or the woman who always interrupted in meetings, in love, in silence. She said it was passion, but it was panic, because as a girl, every time she waited her turn, she was ignored. These moments are not memories. They are systems, and systems replicate themselves until they are reprogrammed. This is why you must become a espiritual arqueologist, unearthing, not escaping, facing, not fixing. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Psalm 139 to 23, 2-4. Not to shame yourself, but to finally see yourself. And when you do, when you look into the eyes of your younger self and say, "I see you, I believe you, I'm sorry no one protected you," you don't just heal, you rise, because the child in you was never weak. They were just unsupported. But now you are the support. You are the protection. You are the home they never had. And from that moment on, something irreversible begins. A quiet shift in the foundation of who you are. Because once the child within you is no longer buried, they become your compass. Not to lead you backward, but to guide you forward in a way that nothing else can. The child doesn't seek titles. They seek truth. They don't crave control. They crave connection. And that's the very thing this world has tried to beat out of you. The systems of power do not fear your intellect. They fear your innocence. They fear your unshakable knowing, the raw trust in your voice when you speak with no agenda. Because that voice can't be bought. It can't be manipulated. It's not performing. It's remembering. A remembering so ancient, it threatens the artificial order of things. Like when Jesus entered the temple, not with politics, not with charm, but with fury for what had become of sacred space. And still, He said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Matthew 19:14, he wasn't talking about age. He was talking about essence, the raw, unfiltered, uncluttered presence that has no need to be anything but exactly what it is. And the world crucifies that. It crucifies what it can't control. But resurrection begins with the courage to rise anyway. So now you stop betraying yourself in rooms that don't deserve your presence. You stop negotiating your standards to avoid being left. You stop explaining your soul to people who haven't even met theirs. You no longer perform to be chosen. You choose yourself again and again and again. Every time you honor your yes, every time you protect your no, every time you sit in silence, instead of rushing to fill it with noise, you resurrect the child within, and they begin to lead, not in loud declarations, in quiet integrity. You walk into the meeting and don't adjust your tone. You sit across from the one who ghosted you and don't shrink. You walk away from the table where love was conditional, not with bitterness, but with clarity. And that clarity becomes your anointing. Because when the child leads, you don't has a purpose, you become it. When the child leads, you don't seek validation. You emanated truth. There's a reason Jesus didn't say, become perfect, but become like a child. Because the world doesn't need more polished faces. It needs more people who remember how to feel deeply, to care recklessly, to love wastefully, to live without armor, but with fire in their bones. And so your posture changes, you become a paradox. Soft but not naive, open but not unguarded, vulnerable but not weak. You become someone who can walk through fire and still hold wonder in your hands. Because you didn't just reclaim your past, you redeemed your future. And now the world doesn't know what to do with you because you are no longer what happened to you. You are who you choose to become in the aftermath. And the child within, they're not buried. They're building, creating, leading. And this time you're following. But even now, in the quiet of this rebirth, a deeper truth emerges, one that few are ready to face. To follow that child, to truly walk beside your resurrected innocence, you must confront the world with new eyes. And when you see clearly, you can no longer play along, because this world is built to keep you asleep. Asleep to yourself, asleep to your soul, asleep to the fire you were born to carry. It teaches you to numb rather than notice, to conform rather than confront, to accumulate rather than awaken, and you begin to see it for what it is. Not just a broken system, but a spiritual narcotic, a carefully constructed architecture designed to separate you from your source by feeding your ego, distracting your mind, and starving your spirit. Look around. The ones celebrated are not the most alive, they're the most adaptable. The ones who've learned to perform the script, hit the marks, smile on cue. But beneath that performance, there's decay, because nothing thrives in captivity, not even success. And now you don't fit, not because you're lost, but because you've been found. You've remembered your original frequency, the sound of your own voice, before it was trained to whisper, the rhythm of your own heartbeat, before it was tethered to the tempo of approval. So what do you do when you wake up in a system that no longer reflects who you are? You become the rupture, the disturbance in the pattern, the one who no longer bends to be understood, but stands to be seen. You walk into the room and shift its gravity, not by shouting, by being, fully, unapologetically, divinely unfiltered. This doesn't mean you are without fear. It means fear no longer decides. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means your care is no longer transactional. It doesn't mean you reject the world. It means you stop letting the world define your worth. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. That renewal is costly. It will strip you, unravel you, empty you of every counterfeit identity you clung to like a lifeline. But on the other side of that emptying, you find a sense not created by culture, but crafted in the quiet, where no eyes watched, where no hands applauded, where only the voice of God said, "This is who you are," not who you were told to be, not who trauma forced you to become, not who you pretend to be to keep peace, but the real you, the fire before the wound you, the sacred defiance that says, "I will not abandon myself again." And from that place, you become dangerous to every system built on compliance, because nothing scares the world more than a soul it cannot own. A person who doesn't sell out, doesn't bow down, doesn't dilute their essence for comfort or company. You become holy ground in a culture addicted to fabrication. A reminder that wholeness is not a product, it is a posture. And when others see it, they'll feel the same question rising. Have I buried my child too? And your life, your unedited, fully resurrected life, will be their invitation to dig, to remember, to rise. Because this isn't just about you. It never was. It's about the echo of your becoming, setting fire to a generation of the half alive and daring them to live whole. And yet there remains one final doorway, the most sacred, the most terrifying, the one people avoid their entire lives, hiding behind healing, distracting themselves with growth, calling it progress, when it's just delay. The doorway of radical responsibility, because it's not enough to reclaim the child, not enough to see through the illusion, not enough to break patterns or stop performing or even to awaken. The question is, what will you do now that you remember who you are? Not think, not feel, do. You see, awareness without movement is self-betrayal in disguise. You can know all your triggers, all your wounds, all your history, and still live in bondage if you refuse to act. Responsibility is not guilt. It is ownership. The ownership of your presence, the ownership of your patterns, the ownership of every word you speak, every room you enter, every energy you allow. It is the willingness to say, "This is mine now," not what happened, not who did it, but what I will build from it. Because there comes a time, and you know when it arrives, when you can no longer blame the past, when you can no longer hide behind the excuse of who hurt you, when you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start declaring, "What will I do because of it?" That's the moment of consecration. When your pain is no longer just a story, it becomes a strategy, a spiritual inheritance, a set of divine tools for a mission that's larger than your ego. Like Moses, exiled and uncertain, with nothing but a staff and a stutter. But God didn't ask for his eloquence. He asked for his yes. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you." Exodus 3:11, 1, 2. That's all you need. Not the plan, not the proof, just presence and permission to rise anyway, to move while still trembling, to speak even when your voice shakes, to become the answer to a prayer someone else hasn't even dared to pray. Because you are not random, you are not misplaced, you are not behind, you are precisely on schedule for what God has written in the fabric of your bones. But you must move. You must stop waiting for conditions to be ideal, for fear to disappear, for every door to swing wide without resistance. No, you walk anyway. You step into the unknown because your faith is greater than your logic, because your vision is more alive than your doubt. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. You stop talking about becoming and become. You stop rehearsing healing and live healed. You stop waiting for rescue and realize you are the rescuer for your lineage, for your future, for the child you buried and have now resurrected, not just to feel again, but to lead. Lead with a voice that doesn't echo fear. Lead with a walk that doesn't mimic survival. Lead with a heart no longer caged by strategy. And if the world doesn't understand good, you weren't made to be understood. You were made to be obeyed by purpose, seen by heaven, feared by systems of control, and followed by those who are still looking for permission to come alive. So give it to them, not with words, but with the gravity of who you now are, because no one grows up without burying a child within. But some of us choose to go back, dig up the bones, and breathe again. And once you breathe again, not just air, but meaning, everything ordinary begins to feel different. You walk into the same rooms, but you're no longer seeking belonging, you're offering presence. You're not analyzing if they like you. You're discerning whether their frequency honors your future. Because when the child in you rises, you don't just reclaim emotion, you reclaim discernment, the ability to feel when something is off before logic can explain it, the knowing that protected you before they taught you to ignore it. It's the ancient compass beneath all the noise, the whisper that says, not this room, not this voice, not this contract, not this road. I'm Isaac. And finally, you listen, not because you're afraid to displease, but because you're unwilling to self-abandon. This is the currency of the whole. You no longer sell pieces of yourself just to be part of someone else's vision. And that includes the world's vision for you, the scripted milestones, the invisible timelines, the pressure to keep up with people running nowhere fast. You move different now, with intention, with delay that honors timing over urgency, with silence that's not emptiness, but power under construction. Because you've stopped measuring growth by how loud your life looks and started measuring it by how little you betray yourself to live it. You start saying no without essays. You leave circles that once felt like oxygen, but now suffocate your expansion. You stop romanticizing potential in jobs, in friends, in partners, and start asking who honors my becoming now, not just my brokenness before. And yes, the circle may shrink, the applause may fade, the familiar may fall away, but what remains is real, and real is more than enough. Better is a handful with quietness than both hands full, together with toil and grasping for the wind. Ecclesiastes 4-6, let them chase the wind. You're rooted now, rooted in identity that can't be shaken by misinterpretation, rooted in purpose that doesn't need a platform, rooted in obedience that listens to something deeper than ambition, truer than comparison, louder than fear. And slowly, what once felt like loss starts to feel like alignment. What once hurt to release becomes sacred space. What once terrified you, stillness, solitude, surrender, now becomes your sanctuary. Because when the child you buried rises, you stop fearing life's silence. You begin to speak within it, with clarity, with conviction, with creativity untainted by performance. You don't create for consumption anymore. You create as communion with God, with truth, with the part of you that never stopped dreaming, but was waiting to be believed again. And now you believe, not blindly, not naively, but deliberately, even when the evidence says otherwise, even when the world calls it unrealistic, even when the doubt whispers, you're too late. You answer, I just arrived, because every step before now was not delay, it was preparation. And everything ahead of you is not fantasy. It is memory returning, the memory of who you were before you buried yourself to survive. This is not the end. It's the beginning you always knew was coming. The return you always sensed in every dream that refused to die. You didn't just survive the grave, you rose carrying the map. And now you lead others out. So here it is, the final threshold, not an ending, but the first time you are not running, not hiding, not shrinking, not explaining. You're just standing, still, whole, unfolded. The child you buried is no longer beneath the soil. They are at your side, ace unafraid, voice unfiltered, holding your hand not as a memory, but as a mirror. And in their reflection, you see it clearly now. You were never too sensitive. You were spiritually aware. You were never too wild. You were untamed for a reason. You were never too much. You were exactly the amount of light the world hoped you'd forget. But you didn't forget. Not entirely. You just got tired. You just got scared. You just got distracted by the applause of people who never even saw you. But God saw you before the titles, before the bruises, before the brilliance. He saw you and said, good, and said, enough, and said, now. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1-5. This is what that verse means. It means nothing about your becoming was ever accidental. Not the pain, not the wilderness, not the voice you had to silence, just to be loved. It all led here. To the moment you say, I remember, I return, arise. You are not what the world called you. You are not the pain that shaped you. You are not the survival patterns that protected you. You are the fire that refused to go out. You are the song no trauma could silence. You are the echo of heaven in a world that rewards amnesia. And now you remember. So walk like it, speak like it, breathe like it, create like it, love like it. Let them feel the weight of your freedom. When you enter a room, let them hear the child in your laugh and the warrior in your silence. Let them witness the resurrection that didn't need a stage, just a yes. Because no one grows up without bearing a child within. But the rare ones, the holy ones, they go back. They dig through the dark and they come back holding fire. You are one of them now. Never forget it. You are free. You are whole. And this time, you're not going back.